He just had lost count, and during the autopsy they found 50 capsules in his stomach content, which means he took 50 all at once. There's your answer. It may not make them very happy, but that's exactly how we determine the cause and manner. So once all that information's in, it's up to me now. The death certificate comes to me, and I have to sign the cause and manner of all the deaths. And that's what I do. So that's being a coroner in a nutshell. Now, are there any questions? Oh, I knew there would be. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the mannerisms of death. There's 5 of them?
5.
Those people that die of a drug overdose, are they considered suicide or accidental, or how do you guys classify those?
That's a good, did everybody hear the question? Okay, that's a very good question. That is where the scene investigation is so important. So your medication form, you bring that in, and generally if somebody is trying to commit suicide, they'll take all of their pills. When you've got some left and some missing, and then you do what's called a victimology with the family. You do you do a psychological profile, basically. What is this person, what's been going on with this person? And it basically comes down to what you can find out, and I always ask them at the bottom line, when the toxicology comes back with the lethal dose of this medication, is there anything in this person's life that you would lead you to believe that they want to take their own life? And it's amazing how honest people really are. I've had people in the ambulance, when I talk to them, you seem a little upset. Do you have a plan to hurt yourself? Yes, I do. You're like, whoa. So, families will be pretty honest. So that's how the forensic pathologist is depending on our scene report to be able to make that determination. If not, we would list it as undetermined.
That covers prescription drugs. What about the recreational drugs?
The recreational drugs are generally listed as accidental. Even though they intentionally took them, again, you look at their history. If they've been abusing drugs for a long time, the chances are they weren't taking a large amount of heroin to try to harm themselves at this particular moment. And they look at the levels, and that's basically a judgment call on the part of the pathologist and the coroner based on the information you have from the scene. And if you don't have enough, then you list it as undetermined. Yes, sir.
There was reference in passing to the O.J. Simpson case earlier. And my question is it appropriate for you or your office to get involved with the development of a case for or in the courtroom?
Well, we wouldn't get involved in, well, O.J., well, yeah, I was going to say there wasn't a death involved. Just 2. I'm thinking of his most recent conviction where he actually, don't ever get charged with a crime in Nevada. Juries convict. He overplayed his hand in our state there, I'm afraid. We only get involved in court cases when we're subpoenaed. But if anybody's been following, there's a Rhonda Reynolds case where the former state trooper who died as a gunshot wound to the head 13 years ago, and it's gone back from homicide or suicide to undetermined and back and been in the court cases. We're actually holding an inquest in Lewis County, the first one in Lewis County in 50 years, to look into that death and have a jury come up with the manner of death. But generally, we don't approach the court with the case and say, hey, this would be very interesting. But we are involved in court cases because we are collecting evidence and going to court a lot. I saw your hand up.
Can the family request an autopsy?
They can, but we try to honor that, but right now, under our system, it costs the county $1,400 for every autopsy. So, but I wouldn't want to tell a family member, listen, your loved one isn't worth $1,400. But the family can request an autopsy. There are cases where the family can say, we don't want an autopsy, and we overrule them, because there are certain cases that by law are required to be an autopsy. But we do try to honor that. There are also options. You can have private autopsies, but they start at about $3,000. And we don't do those. But the family can request it, but it would depend on the case. I've had families that the person's been 85 years old, and the private doctor signed a death certificate listing, cancer of the throat, and the family's like, but I thought it was cancer of the lung. That's kind of what we consider a gee whiz autopsy, because it really doesn't change the manner. Yeah, but we will honor family requests. Well, yes, sir.
On the autopsy, if it's against the family's religious practice and you want to do it, what's the outcome there?
If we do the autopsy against their religious practice?
Or do you do it against the religious practice?
Yes, we will, because by law there are certain, if you're a victim of a homicide, we have to do an autopsy. So there are provisions in the RCWs that can override the family's concern. We do try to work with the family, and I mean there are some very strict religions that prevent autopsies. But under the present law, we have certain cases that we have to do autopsies because our doctors have to be able to say beyond any medical certainty that this is what happened. We usually explain to them, we're doing this so that, like in a traffic collision, we're doing this so that in court, the defense attorney can't say, how do we know that when the 18-wheeler was just seconds away from causing the T-bone collision, that the decedent didn't suffer a massive coronary event, and that that's what killed him, and not the injuries from the accident. Therefore, my client is not guilty of vehicular homicide. And that's what we try to do with the folks. Yes, sir?
When the press,
Sorry.
just the word press, when the media receives information, are they very discretionary at all about what they interpret?
I'm a politician. Watch this. Dealing with the media is very interesting because we understand that the media has a need to get information out to the public. The media should also understand that there's a lot of information on some cases we can't make public. For example, if we have a homicide and there are certain details about what happened to that victim, that the only people who know about it are the investigators and the suspect, that can't be out in the media. They push as far as they can, and I know when dealing with them, it's kind of a game. It's nothing personal. They want to get as much information, and anything I say can and will be used against me on the front page. I know that. But I also bear in mind that the information I release to the media is coordinated through the sheriff's office or law enforcement. And about the death, the only thing I give them is what they can find off the death certificate. Anybody can go over to our Bureau of Vital Statistics and order a death certificate. So the information that's on there, so for example, we just recently had an officer-involved shooting. And the cause of death was penetrating gunshot wound to the abdomen, to the head, I'm sorry, no, to the abdomen. No, it was the head, I'm sorry. To the head, and abdomen, it's all close. And the man was homicide and he was shot by police. Well, this victim was shot more than one time. And the press was like, well, where else was he shot? Where else was he shot? That was information I didn't release because it was not available to the public off the death certificate. So dealing with the media, we understand. I believe I have a good relationship. I have developed a press release email that all I have to do is hit that, and I let them know about everything that's going on. And there's a few that push the envelope a little bit, but most of them it's pretty good. It's a good relationship, and I don't know if you folks have seen that down in Lewis County we have a new thing. It's called Operation at Ease. And somebody had learned that we had unclaimed remains. So if you pass away and there's no one to make funeral arrangements, after 30 days you're cremated, and we hold your remains. We've had veterans' remains there for about 5 or 6 years, so we had about 20 of them. I believe 15. And somebody from Winlock came out from the VFW, and now we're a part of a pilot program where when we get unclaimed veterans, we release them over to this gentleman. He's working with the Tahoma National Cemetery in Kent, and on November 12th, there's going to be a procession from Lewis County to take all those remains up there and give them burials with full military honors. That's something I dealt with the paper. I have unclaimed remains going back 15 years in my office of people that are not veterans. The press has offered to put their names in the paper to see if families come forward. So it's a two-way street, and as long as the press realizes you're not trying to stonewall them, and you're just trying to be honest, then you have a great relationship. Yes, sir?
Do the various types of lab analyses take so long because they take so long?
Yes.
Or because there's a physical backup?
It's probably both. In Vegas, it was 6 to 8 weeks for toxicology. DNA was 14 months to 2 years. Right now, if it's a criminal case, if we have a homicide, we can send our DNA down to the Washington State Patrol Lab in Vancouver, and it'll move up to the top. We have one gentleman we know is not a homicide. He's been in the cooler now with us, I believe, since the beginning of 2010. His DNA is down at the University of Texas, where they do it for free, but they do criminal cases first. And just getting someone identified is low on the totem pole. And 6 to 8 weeks for tox is pretty standard because there's a lot of backup. And but it's amazing. DNA and toxicology, Saddam Hussein was captured in a hole in Tikrit, and 2 days later they had DNA back. And I've had families say to me, why can't you do that? Because I'm not the president of the United States. if I'm working in a lab in Washington and they say, we got this DNA, we need it in 2 days, and I go, really? No. You don't understand. The president, oh yeah. But that would mean the cases that person's working on is now pushed aside. So it's just a limited number of folks. I see the hook is starting to come my way. You see the hook? One last question? Yes?
Hypothetically, you find someone on the street, homeless, and there are a bunch of alcohol bottles around, or there's syringes around. You take them in, you look, you do a blood test, and you find all kinds of illegal drugs in there, or you find a lot of alcohol in there. In the case of, say, the alcoholic, do you go further? Do you go in and look at the liver and say, okay, that's easy, cirrhosis, he died? Or do you have to go further? Obviously, there's no signs of trauma. You have to go further and see if it was really a heart attack or something.
That's a good question. We don't do halfway autopsy, so if we have someone on the street and we're not sure, or in the house, even if someone in the house will be like, I call the doc and I say, we're not completely sure as to where this case is going or what caused the death, we'll do an autopsy. And they don't do half autopsies, so there wouldn't be just toxicology. Our doc would come in and do a complete autopsy and say, yes, cirrhosis of the liver was present or cardiac was present, but then it would be pending toxicology for those results to come back. So a lot of times we have deaths that are pending toxicology on child deaths, baby deaths. Those are pending toxicology and micro studies, and those can be 3 months to get all that back, because that's how in-depth the child death investigation is. So I see that's the end of my time. Thank you.
We have a small token there.